Okay, so welcome to Starting 101. Um, Today, we're going to cover basically, do you have a business or do you have a hobby? That's pretty much it. Because, the background on this is that this series of live streaming is me documenting 101 lessons that I'm learning as I'm restarting my business from scratch. Um, because over the last couple of years or whatever, I'd started to build some things. So now I own a couple of SaaS products, I've written a book and all these things. But, I stepped back and realized it wasn't really a business. So that's really the journey that I'm taking, is like taking everything, taking all the lessons that I've learned and then starting everything from scratch and structuring it. So today I'm going to just cover, is it a business or is it a hobby? Um, if you're new or if this is your first time seeing this, I'm JP from jpadamsonline.com, and you can follow me on YouTube or follow me on Instagram or Facebook. The page is all the same, at jpadamsonline.com. So, you know, this kind of like this is actually at the root of everything that got me started with this revisiting um my business, or what I thought was my business at the time, or my side business. And essentially, I think it could probably go back to way back in time when everyone used to print out business cards and say that they were the CEO of this or the CEO of that. And it used to annoy the crap out of me. But I think even from back then, I used to spend a lot of time studying businesses and studying business as a whole. Even got a minor in business management. And yet, if you stopped and said, you know what, put together like what's your plan for your side business or whatever, as far as like putting together a business plan, you know, my brain would immediately like conjure up this idea of like a 5, 10, 15 page document with market research and all these things. And but I think since then it's gotten a lot simpler for me. So now it's more like something where you basically take any idea that you have and just kind of like run through it, and there's a simple checklist to see, what, is this a viable business idea or not. So with everything that I'm restarting right now, in the last episode I kind of like looked at what was the audience, or what's the market, or what were the people that I would really enjoy spending time with and enjoy serving them. So if I had to spend all the time researching and coming up with stuff for this particular group of people, who would it be? And so now that I kind of like know that, I'm like, I know who I'm doing it for. Now it's like, okay, in general, what's the general business structure that's going to surround this? What do I want it to look like? And so, to really go over that, you got to look at it, because there's this one concept that stuck with me. It's there's a book called The Personal MBA. I read it probably every couple of years, but essentially that book is something that I would say it's a recommended read for anybody that wants to get into a business, whether it's just a side hustle, whether it's a real business, where it's just even investing. Just if you want to understand how businesses work, that book is an absolute must. It's a prerequisite. But I was, thinking about this whole project as we're going now, and it's like, okay, the simplest thing is this, is like there are 5 parts that you have to understand about every business, because if any one of those parts is missing, then it drastically changes from you having a business to you having something else. So, and the reason why it's kind of like key and crucial to understand this stuff is that if you understand it, then you can assess your own business, you can assess other people's businesses, you can assess business ideas, you can see how far along or how well formed a thought is on what a business is supposed to be. So for my idea right now, it also allows you enough constraints to be creative on what you're trying to do and how you actually want things to be structured and laid out. So with this particular approach, is like, now that I know the who, the question is now, it's like, what's the structure? What's the what part of this? And to do that in a way that's like quick enough, you really have to look at it and say, okay, how do I get a how do I get an idea of what the business is going to be without sitting down and writing like a 15-page business plan and doing all this market research and stuff? So to do that, I'll kind of like walk through my thought process here on the same vein like I've been doing. So really like what I'm looking at now is, first, I guess let me cover the 5 parts of a business, and then I'll kind of like go through and walk through how I'm using it to constrain my ideas on what I want my business to now be going forward. So the 5 parts of any business, and you can see this in any business that you look at, is you got to have value creation. So what's the value that you're creating, for the customer? Because people are paying for some value that they're getting. They're not just like, giving money out of the goodness of their heart. So the value creation is the first part, because every business has to create some kind of value for the customer. The next part is marketing. So now that you've created that value, how do you get the attention of people to know that that value has been created? Next part is sales. So now those people know that the value has been created and they come in. How do you get them to actually like exchange money for that value? The next part is value delivery, which is now that they've paid for it, how do you make sure you deliver, according to their expectations, what they said that they wanted? And the last part is finance, which is basically how do you make sure you're making enough money so that you can keep going and, at a rate that it's actually like fun for you to keep going. So those are like the 5 parts of any business. And you can kind of like play around with business ideas based on that by adjusting any one of those things. So again, those 5 parts are value creation, value delivery, marketing, sales, and finance. And so looking at that and seeing, what am I comfortable with? So you're looking at this like, what kind of value can I create is really at the start of it. So the value that I've created is software products. So that's one piece of value. Another value that I've created is essentially books. So that's another form, like I guess education could also be entertainment. So that's another form of value that I've created. The marketing side of it, like how do you then get attention to this value? This is something that probably like eluded me with my other part of the main reason I'd said my other thing wasn't even a business to begin with, is that I never really had the marketing figured out. I didn't have the marketing pegged, like who it was for, and I didn't really have it pegged on how I was going to get in front of them. But thinking about it now, the marketing aspect of this and the way that I want to approach it is essentially figuring out what these people that I want to serve, whatever problems they're having, getting in front of them, most likely with either direct social media channels, content marketing, and basically ads. So content marketing is easy enough. You write something, you make a video, you put it up, the people see it, they see what you're all about, and you can make an offer to them. Like for example, like if I were to be pitching on this, I'd say, well, go on Amazon and buy my book, Thinker versus Doer. But I'm not pitching on this. But that's an example of using content marketing, making an offer, and having people go and actually like transact on that. But that's a way to kind of like draw people and get attention to the value you've created to get them out there. Now on the sales side of it, I think that most of the challenge with the sales side of it is going to come down to, if I'm transacting online, then it's basically sales copy. So there's a thing called copywriting, which is writing in a way that's takes the sales process from an in-person thing to a thing that you do online. So the sales tools that I'm thinking of using the most right now is basically getting a better handle on sales copywriting, meaning like writing things, descriptions, and in a way that's clear enough and persuasive enough for people to understand the value that you're delivering, and in a way that actually not convinces them, but shows all the values and benefits in such a way that they see that that's the thing that they need. So from a sales standpoint, that is where most of the sales is going to be. Another is probably going to be with essentially regular sales copy, or taking sales copy and pitching in a video. That could be directly in video or a webinar format or something of the sort. There are a couple of ways to do it. Excuse me. So that's the sales component. So we got the value creation, which is most likely going to be either some expert service, as far as like expert service, expert knowledge. The marketing is going to be essentially using content or targeted advertising to drive traffic to and to the value that's been created. The sales is going to be mostly through written communication to try to do that, or video communication to try to convince people to transact. And the mechanism to actually do that is just clicking a buy button is easy enough. You put something up, people can click the buy button if the copy is clear and convincing enough that they see that it's something they actually have to buy. So value creation, marketing, sales. Value delivery is actually probably one of the easier ones, because I think if it's services, there's a challenge there in making sure that you deliver that. I would probably have to design any customer experience journey for any services. So if I was consulting or something on things that I know about, so let's say product management, or just putting processes together, or something of the sort, or how do you like basically like structure a new project when it's in the early stages. Like if I'm consulting on something like that, I would have to make sure that the experience is clear enough that, from the time that someone says, yes, I'm interested in this, they know and have a clear expectation of how they're going to then get that. Is there going to be proposals involved? Is going to be contracts involved? Is it going to be, whatever that flow is, like that has to be laid out to give them a pleasant enough experience, because that's part of the delivery of whatever is being offered. Now, if it's just an information product or a course or something of the sort that's more educational in nature, then that's a little bit easier, because you can kind of like bake all of that into the experience of whatever platform or whatever tool you're using to deliver the content to them after they've made the purchase. Now, on the finance side of it, it's like, how do you make sure that you're keeping the business making enough money so that you still enjoy the damn thing and it's worthwhile? That at the moment, I'm pretty much looking at bootstrapping everything, which means just taking some allocation of like whatever I make from the day job, and basically saying like this percentage would go there, or saying this set amount is my constraint to what I'm going to use to try to get the business off the ground. So that's essentially it. So it's kind of like in each one of those things, there's a little bit of a model as far as like how you do it. Because if you look at it, you're like, okay, what's your value creation? Like there's a bunch of ways you could do that. You could do, like people do subscription boxes, people write books, people make music, people create art. All these things are forms of value. And that's easy enough. You look at the marketing, well, you could do, I don't know, radio ads. You could do billboards. You could have somebody standing on a corner waving one of those wacky flaily arm things. There's a bunch of ways you could do it. You can hand out flyers, right? Whatever it takes for you to get the attention and get people to actually like come in and start knowing that you're offering that value. From a value delivery standpoint, I think this is where a lot of thought comes in, because you really have to make sure like customer service becomes part of this. Are there any tangible things that you're giving them? Is there brochures you're giving them? Is there letterheads? Is there all these things? Your website, if people are buying stuff from it and receiving it, are you sending them something via email? or you using some other thing. Like my book is on Amazon, so it's like I know that Amazon handles the delivery part of that, so I don't even have to think about it after the fact. But the choice to use Amazon is definitely like one option, for example. Um, and then the finance part of it still comes down to the same thing, which is you got to pick at the model. There's a couple of models. You can do angel investing. You could go with venture capital. You could go with an incubator. You could go with a bootstrap model. You could take out personal loans. There's small business loans. There's a bunch of ways, but in one of those in those five choices, you kind of like have your options of how you want your thing to be structured. And the funny thing is, the reason why these five pieces are so essential and have to be there is that if you look at any business and you take away one of the parts, then it becomes something else. And I think, what was the example? Like a good example was if you um, have all five parts of it. So you have the financing to do it, you have the value created, you have the marketing, and you have the value delivery, right? But you don't have sales, then what you have is a charity. If you have marketing, sales, value creation, but there's no value delivery and you have the finance, then what you have is a scam because you told people you had some value, you promised it to them, they gave you money, you never gave them the thing, right? So it's like you take away any one of these pieces and it becomes something else. If you have all of those and let's say you don't have the finance, then well, you're probably going to be bankrupt in a second. Or if you have all of them and let's say you don't have the marketing, nobody knows what you made, which means nobody will come in and buy it. So it might as well be a hobby. So it's all these things are essentially what it takes to say, you know what, I'm going to create some value and I'm going to put a system around it so I can sustain it, which is usually the finance part of it. And I'm going to make sure that people find out about it and give me money for it so that I can keep doing this thing over and over again. So essentially, that's just me thinking through you know, what's the business plan part of this. And if you have any business idea of your own, like you really just want to be able to sit down and just run it through it. Like, what's the value I'm creating? How am I going to deliver it? How am I going to get people to know that it actually exists? Right? How am I going to sell it? Like, how am I going to convince them to part with their money? And how do I keep this going long enough for it to bring in enough money for it to be worthwhile and self-sustaining rather than being something that always sucks money on my pocket, but no money actually comes into the business. So that's pretty much it. If you want to like run through and do a quick, like I call it a one-page checklist or like a one-page business plan, which is ask yourself those five questions and come up with your best answers for them. And then you can iterate through it and flesh it out more and more as time passes. But you got to have at a minimum any idea that you have. You got to have at a minimum the ability to know what you're going to be selling to who, how they're going to find out about it, and for how long before you make enough money for it to sustain itself. But that's pretty much it on today's episode of Starting 101. This is the third go, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good day. And if you're not following me, subscribe on YouTube. Turn on the notifications if you want to see these when I come on live in the future. And follow me on Facebook if you want to see the lives when I come on. All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.